everyone, welcome back to Knit for Life. If you're new here, I'm Brette. I'm a physical therapist, but I'm also a knitter. And honestly, that's one of the reasons this channel even exists, because I love knitting just as much as you do. So today we're going to talk about something that I hear all the time. Why does knitting hurt? Maybe your neck gets sore and tight, maybe your shoulders tighten up, maybe your hands ache or cramp, maybe your wrists ache, or maybe you've just started wondering, is knitting actually bad for me? So as a physical therapist, I hear those questions all the time. And I have some really good news for you. Knitting usually isn't the problem. So now that doesn't mean that knitting can't cause discomfort. It absolutely can, but understanding why it happens changes everything. So my goal today isn't to tell you to knit less. It's actually the opposite. My goal is to help you knit more comfortably so you can keep doing this hobby that you love for years to come. So because I truly believe you shouldn't have to choose between taking care of your body and doing something that you love. So grab your knitting and get comfortable and let's dive in. So before we get into all the science behind this, I just want to tell you a little bit about why I started Knit for Life. So I've been a physical therapist for over 25 years. For my entire career, I've helped people recover from orthopedic injuries, neck pain, shoulder pain, tendonitis, back pain, repetitive strain injuries. That's what I've done every day. But when I leave work, I'm just like you. I come home, I sit down with my knitting, and I lose myself in my project. Knitting is a way for me to stay sane. It's a way for me to relax. It slows my mind down. It helps me unwind after a busy day. It gives me something creative to look forward to. And honestly, I think a lot of you feel the same way. But here's the funny part. I'd spend my entire day teaching patients how to take care of their bodies. Then I'd come home, sit on the couch, pick up my knitting, and completely ignore my own advice. I'd be leaning forward, looking down at my stitches. My shoulders would slowly creep up towards my ears. I'd tell myself just one more row, then just one more repeat, then maybe I'll stop after I finish this sleeve. Does that sound familiar? Because I know I'm not the only one. I'm not alone in this. And before I knew it, 2 or 3 hours had gone by without standing up once. Being a physical therapist doesn't make me perfect. I still get excited about projects. I still lose track of time. I still have to remind myself to take movement breaks. And I think that's important to say, because if you've ever found yourself doing the exact same thing, you're not failing. You're just human. And that realization is really where Knit for Life began. I realized knitters didn't need someone telling them to stop knitting. They needed someone who understood both knitting and the human body, someone who could explain why discomfort happens, someone who could give practical solutions, someone who wasn't going to tell them to give up the hobby they love. Because I don't want you to stop knitting. I want your body to support the knitting you want to do. Whether that's one pair of socks, a colorwork sweater, a giant blanket, or knitting every evening while you watch your favorite show. So that's what Knit for Life is all about. It's helping you move well, knit well, and live well so you can find comfort in every stitch. So let's start with what I think is probably the biggest myth in the knitting world. I hear people say all the time, my doctor told me that knitting is bad for me, or I guess I'm just getting old, or maybe I have to give up knitting. And honestly, that makes me a little sad because I don't think knitting deserves the blame. So can knitting contribute to discomfort? Absolutely. But knitting itself usually isn't the problem. So let me explain what I mean. One of the biggest myths I hear as a PT is that knitting is bad for your body. I really don't believe that's true. I think knitting has gotten a bad reputation because people associate pain with whatever activity they happen to be doing. So if your neck hurts after knitting, it must be the knitting. If your hands ache after finishing a sweater, it must be the knitting. But I want you to think about it a little bit differently. Sitting isn't bad for you. Standing isn't bad for you. Walking isn't bad for you. Even exercise, which we all know is incredibly good for us, can cause discomfort if we suddenly do more than our body is prepared for. So knitting is exactly the same. It's simply an activity. And activities place demands on our body. As PTs, we often talk about something called load. So don't let that word intimidate you. All load means is the amount of work you're asking your body to do. So every single activity has a load. Walking has a load, carrying groceries has a load, gardening has a load, playing pickleball has a load, and yes, knitting has a load too. So the most important thing we understand is that load isn't bad. So in fact, our bodies actually need it. It's how muscles get stronger. It's how tendons adapt. It's how our bones stay healthy. Without load, our bodies actually become weaker. So the problem isn't that we're placing demands on our body. The problem happens when those demands become greater than what our body is ready for. So let me give you an example. Every spring, I hear people talking about gardening. The weather finally gets nice. They're excited to get outside. Maybe they've been looking forward to planting flowers or cleaning up the yard all winter. So they spend 6 or 7 hours outside that first beautiful Saturday. So when they wake up the next morning, everything hurts. Their back hurts, their shoulders hurt, their knees hurt. Was gardening bad for them? No. Their body just wasn't prepared for 6 hours of straight gardening after months of doing very little of it. So knitting works the same way. So maybe you just usually knit for 30 or 45 minutes in the evening, but then you're trying to finish a sweater before Rhinebeck. Or maybe it's holiday knitting season, or maybe you're test knitting for a deadline. All of a sudden, you're knitting 3 or 4 hours every night. Your body notices, not because knitting suddenly became dangerous, but because you've suddenly increased the amount of work you were asking your body to do. And here's something that I think surprises a lot of knitters. Knitting really is a full body activity. I know it doesn't look like exercise. You're sitting in a chair, you're holding a pair of needles. It seems pretty relaxed, but think about it. Everything that's happening while you're knitting, your fingers are constantly moving. Your hands are gripping your needles. Your wrists are stabilizing every stitch. Your forearms are working over and over and over and over again. Your shoulders are holding the weight of your arms. Your neck is supporting your head. Your upper back is helping keep you upright. Even your core is working to keep you balanced in your chair. There's so much more happening than most people even realize. So that's why when someone tells me my neck hurts when I knit or my hands hurt when I knit, the first question I don't ask is, what project are you making? Instead, I ask things like, how long were you knitting? Did you take any movement breaks? Were your arms supported? Were you looking down the entire time? Have you been knitting more than usual this week? Because those answers usually tell me much more than the knitting itself does, or the project itself. And here's what I love about that. If knitting isn't the real problem, that means there are things we can change. We can improve how we knit. We can improve how we recover. We can build a body that's better prepared for the hobbies we love. And that honestly is what gives me so much hope, because I never want someone to think their only option is to stop knitting. I want you to understand what's happening, because once you understand that, you can do something about it. So if knitting itself isn't actually the problem, then what is? Well, as a PT, I see 4 things come up over and over again. And chances are, if you've ever experienced discomfort while you knit, 1 or maybe all 4 of these are playing a role. So let's start with the first one. The first reason knitting can cause discomfort is something called repetitive movement. No, don't let that term scare you. It simply just means doing the same thing over and over again. And if you think about it, that's exactly what knitting is. So every stitch requires your fingers to move. Your hands are moving, your wrists are moving, your forearms are working. So thousands of times, literally thousands. Now here's the important part. Those movements aren't bad. Our bodies were designed to move. So movement is actually one of the best things we can do for our bodies. The problem is when we ask the exact same muscles and tendons to do the exact same job over and over and over again without giving them a chance to recover. So think about like rubbing your arm with one finger. If you rubbed your arm 1 time, nothing happens. Rub it 10 times, still probably nothing. But if you rub the exact same spot 1,000 times, eventually your skin would probably get a little irritated. Not because rubbing your arm is dangerous, but because of the repetition. Our muscles and tendons respond in a very similar way. They don't usually complain because of just 1 stitch or 1 row. It's the thousands of stitches that add up over time. And this is something I think is really important to understand, because pain doesn't always mean you've injured yourself. I'm going to say that again because I think it's worth repeating. Pain does not always mean damage. Sometimes pain is just simply your body's way of saying, hey, I've been working really hard. Think about the last time you went on a long hike. Maybe your legs were sore the next day. That soreness didn't necessarily mean you injured yourself. It meant your muscles had worked harder than they were used to. Knitting can be exactly the same. So sometimes your forearms feel tired, sometimes your hands feel achy, sometimes your shoulders are letting you know they've been working for a while, but that doesn't automatically mean you've done something wrong. It doesn't automatically mean you have tendonitis or arthritis or permanent damage. It just means that your body is talking to you. It's one of the things I always encourage my patients to do, is become curious instead of fearful. So instead of immediately thinking, oh no, I injured myself, try asking, what is my body trying to tell me? So did I knit for longer than usual? Have I been working towards a deadline? Have I skipped my movement breaks? Am I gripping my needles tighter than I realize? Did I spend all afternoon in exactly the same position? These questions are often much more helpful because they lead us towards solutions, not fear. And honestly, I've been there myself. When I'm really excited about a project, especially if it's color work or I'm test knitting something, I can get completely lost in what I'm doing. I stop paying attention to my body. I stop noticing that my shoulders have crept up. I stop noticing that I'm gripping my needles a little tighter, I'm clenching my jaw, and before I know it, my body reminds me. Not because knitting is bad, but because I've simply asked my body to do more than it was ready for in that moment. So the good news, our bodies are incredibly adaptable. They get stronger, they build endurance, they become more resilient, which means that repetitive movement by itself isn't something we should fear. We just need to respect it, give our bodies opportunities to recover, and pay attention before those little warning signs become bigger problems. Now, repetitive movement is only one piece of the puzzle. The second thing I see all the time, and honestly, I think this one is even more common, is something almost every knitter is guilty of. We stay in one position for too long. So this is called static posture. Now that's just a fancy way of saying we stay in the same position for a really long time. And I have to laugh a little bit because knitters are really good at this. We find that perfect spot on the couch. We've got our favorite blanket, our cup of tea, our project. Maybe there's a good movie on or a knitting podcast. Everything is just right. And then we don't move for an hour, maybe 2, sometimes 3. Sound familiar? I know it does for me. So because I've absolutely looked up at the clock and thought, how is it already 10 o'clock? How is it already dark out? The thing is, our bodies weren't designed to stay in one position forever. They were designed to move. And even if you're sitting with most people would consider really good posture, eventually your muscles get tired. So that's why I always tell people the best posture is your next posture. I love that phrase because I think it takes a lot of pressure off of us. People are always asking me, what's the perfect posture for knitting? And honestly, there isn't one. There's no magical position that you can hold for 3 hours and expect your body to be perfectly happy. Even a really good posture becomes a bad posture if you stay there for too long. So think about holding a coffee mug. It's not very heavy, so you could hold it in your hand without thinking twice. But now imagine I asked you to hold that same coffee mug straight out in front of you and don't move. Just hold it there for 30 minutes. That coffee mug didn't get heavier, but your shoulders, your muscles would definitely start complaining. The problem wasn't the weight. The problem was asking the same muscles to hold the exact same position for too long. So knitting is very similar. Most knitting projects really aren't that heavy, so especially at the beginning, but your shoulders are doing something really important the entire time. They're supporting the weight of your arms. And think about that for a second. Your project might only weigh a few ounces, but your arms don't. Your shoulder muscles are supporting your arms at every single minute you're knitting. So if your elbows are floating out in space, those muscles never really get a break. So now add in something almost every knitter does. We start looking down just a little. Maybe we're checking a cable. Maybe we're counting stitches. Maybe we're working on lace. But before we know it, our head slowly creeps forward and our shoulders round, and suddenly we become what I like to call a knitting turtle. I laugh because I catch myself doing it all the time. Maybe you've noticed yourself doing it too. Your chin starts getting closer and closer to your project. Your shoulders sneak up towards your ears and you're completely focused on your stitches. Your body is quietly working overtime. Here's something that surprises a lot of people. Your head is actually really, really heavy. It weighs somewhere around 10 to 12 pounds. That's about the weight of a bowling ball. So when your head is stacked over your shoulders, your neck muscles don't have to work nearly as hard. But every inch your head moves forward, those muscles have to work harder and harder to support it. That's why so many knitters finish a project and think, oh, my neck is killing me. It wasn't one stitch, it wasn't one row, it was spending hours with your head in the same position. The good news is that this is one of the easiest things to improve. So sometimes the answer isn't stretching your neck more, sometimes it's asking your neck to do less work. So instead of bringing your eyes down to your knitting, try bringing your knitting up to your eyes. Maybe that's putting a pillow in your lap, maybe it's supporting your elbows with your pillows or a blanket, but it's using better lighting so you don't have to lean in. Maybe it's finally wearing those reading glasses that have been sitting on your table next to your chair and you never actually use. I know, I have reading glasses everywhere. I have them in my knitting bag, I have them next to my chair, I have them in my purse. And as I've gotten older, I've realized they're one of the best ergonomic tools I own. Because when I can actually see my stitches, I naturally sit taller, I don't have to lean forward as much to see my stitches. Little changes like that might not seem very exciting, but they can make a huge difference over the course of hundreds of knitting sessions. So remember, we're not looking for perfection, we're looking for less strain. We're looking for small improvements that add up over time. Because when you put enough small improvements together, your body starts feeling a whole lot better. All right, so now we've talked about repetitive movement. We've talked about staying in one position for too long. The third piece of the puzzle is something every knitter has experienced: muscle fatigue. And I think this one is incredibly important to understand because it's your body's way of communicating with you. So let's talk about muscle fatigue. I think this is one of the most misunderstood parts of discomfort. So when people start feeling tired or achy or stiff, their first thought is often, oh no, something must be wrong. But fatigue by itself isn't a bad thing. It's actually completely normal. Our muscles are designed to work. They're also designed to get tired. So think about going for a long walk. At some point, your legs start to feel like a little heavy. That doesn't necessarily mean you've injured yourself. It means your muscles have been working. So knitting is no different. So even though knitting doesn't look physically demanding, your muscles are working the entire time. Your fingers are constantly moving, your forearms are controlling every stitch, your shoulders are supporting your arms, your upper back is helping keep you upright, your neck is supporting your head. Those muscles don't get to clock out until you put your knitting down. So eventually they get tired, and honestly, that's okay. Fatigue is part of being human. The problem isn't that your muscles become tired. The problem is when we ignore what they're trying to tell us. I like to think of fatigue as your body's check engine light. It's not necessarily telling you that something is broken. It's telling you to pay attention. So maybe you just need to change positions. Maybe it's time to stand up. Maybe you need a drink of water. Maybe it's time to stretch. Or maybe you've simply done enough for the day. One of the biggest mistakes I see knitters make is trying to push through fatigue. We've all done it. You're almost done with the sleeve. You only have 10 more rows left. You think, I'll just finish this part. And then that 10 rows becomes 20, 20 becomes 50, and before you know it, you've been knitting another hour, maybe 2. I've done it. I still catch myself doing it all the time, especially if I'm really excited about a project, or I'm test knitting and trying to stay on a schedule, or I'm almost at one of those really satisfying stopping points, like splitting for the arms. It's easy to convince yourself just a little bit longer. But here's what often happens. As our muscles get tired, our movement changes. Maybe you don't even notice it. Maybe your shoulders start creeping up towards your ears. You grip your needles a little bit tighter. You start leaning further forward. Your wrists bend a little more. Your posture slowly changes without you even realizing it. Your body's trying to help. So when one muscle gets tired, another muscle steps in. That's called compensation. Compensation isn't always a bad thing. Our bodies are incredibly smart. They'll find another way to get the job done. But if we stay in that compensated position for a long time, that's often when discomfort starts showing up. Maybe your neck starts getting tight. Maybe your forearms start aching, maybe your hands start cramping. This isn't because you've injured yourself, but because your body has been working really hard for a really long time. This is one of the reasons I encourage knitters to check in with themselves every once in a while. Not just when they're hurting, but ask yourself, how do my shoulders feel right now? Am I gripping my needles harder than I need to? Am I holding my breath? Have I moved in the last 20 or 30 minutes? Those little check-ins only take a few seconds, but they can completely change how your body feels by the end of your knitting session. One thing I tell my patients all the time is your body whispers before it screams. Maybe you've heard me say that before. It doesn't usually go from the feeling completely fine to severe pain. It gives you little clues, a little tightness, a little stiffness, a little fatigue. Those are opportunities. Your body's way of saying, hey, let's make a small adjustment before this becomes a bigger problem. And I think that's such an empowering way to look at it, because instead of feeling afraid of discomfort, we can learn from it. We can respond to it. We can make small changes. And usually those small changes are enough to keep us knitting comfortably. Now there's one more concept that completely changes how I think about knitting discomfort. And honestly, it's probably one of the most hopeful things I can tell you. It's something we call capacity. And once you understand it, it explains why one knitter can knit for 4 hours without any symptoms, and another starts feeling uncomfortable after 30 minutes. And the good news is capacity isn't fixed, you can improve it. I feel capacity is one of the most hopeful concepts in PT. Don't let that word intimidate you. Capacity simply means how much can your body comfortably handle before symptoms start to show up. That's it. Every single one of us has a different capacity. So think about walking. Some people can go out tomorrow and walk 10 miles without even thinking twice. Other people might start getting tired after a half a mile. That doesn't mean that one person's better than the other, not at all. It simply just means they're different. They're starting at different points. Knitting is exactly the same. So maybe you've had a friend who can knit for hours and hours and feel completely fine. Meanwhile, after 30 or 45 minutes, your neck starts getting really stiff. It's really easy to look at someone else and think, what's wrong with me? But the answer is probably nothing. Your body simply has a different capacity right now. And here's the part that I love. Capacity is not fixed. It can change. It can improve. Your body is incredibly adaptable. In fact, that's one of the amazing things about the human body. It's constantly responding to the demands we place on it. So think about someone who decides to start walking for exercise. Maybe the first week they can only walk 10 minutes before they're tired. But if they keep walking consistently, 10 minutes becomes 15, 15 becomes 20, and eventually they can walk for an hour without even thinking about it. So what changed? Their capacity did. The exact same thing happens with knitting. If right now your body starts feeling uncomfortable after knitting 30 minutes, that doesn't necessarily mean 30 minutes is your limit forever. Maybe your shoulders need to get a little stronger. Maybe you need to improve your posture. Maybe you need to take movement breaks. Maybe you need to build your knitting time gradually instead of jumping from 30 minutes to 3 hours. So little by little, your body adapts. And that's why I want you to stop thinking about your body as broken. Instead, think about it as trainable, because that's exactly what it is. As physical therapists, we're constantly helping people build capacity. When someone comes into my clinic after an injury, I don't expect them to do everything they used to do on day one. We build it back up gradually, a little more movement, a little more strength, a little more endurance. Over time, their body becomes capable of doing more. Knitting works the same way. So if your goal is to knit comfortably for longer periods of time, we don't usually get there by pushing through pain. We get there by preparing your body. We strengthen it, we improve endurance, we improve mobility, we improve recovery, and little by little your capacity grows. I think that's such an encouraging message because it reminds us that our bodies are not static. They're constantly adapting, they're constantly learning, they're constantly changing. So now I do want to mention something that's really important. Sometimes pain does represent an actual injury. So if you're experiencing persistent numbness, tingling, weakness, pain that's waking you up at night, or symptoms that continue for days after you stop knitting, that's different. And those are things I want you to take seriously. So we're going to talk more about warning signs later on, but for most knitters, the aches and stiffness they experience after a long knitting session are often a sign that their body simply needs a little more support. Not less knitting forever, just a better plan. And that's exactly what I want to help you build. So because once you understand why discomfort happens, you stop blaming yourself, you stop blaming knitting, and you start asking a much better question. What can I do to help my body enjoy knitting even more? So for me, that's what Knit for Life is all about. It's not about finding one magical stretch or buying a special chair or one perfect pair of needles. It's about looking at the whole picture, because long-term comfort doesn't come from one thing. It comes from putting lots of small habits together over time, and that's what I call the Knit for Life framework. So after treating people for years and after making plenty of my own knitting mistakes, I realized something. Most advice for knitters focuses on just one piece of the puzzle. Someone says you need better posture. Someone else says you need to stretch. Another person says you need different needles. And honestly, none of those things are wrong. They're just incomplete. So comfort while knitting isn't about one magic solution. It's about looking at the whole picture for you. And that's why I created what I call the Knit for Life framework, because it's really simple. Move well, knit well, live well. Those are the three things that work together to help you keep knitting comfortably. So let's start with the first one, move well. It's all about what your body is doing while you're knitting. It's your posture, it's your positioning, it's your movement, it's your ergonomics. Now, when I say posture, I know some people immediately picture sitting perfectly straight with their shoulders back, pulled way back, and honestly, that's not what I'm talking about. As a physical therapist, I don't spend my day walking around telling people to sit up straight, because even perfect posture becomes uncomfortable if you stay there for long enough. So remember what we talked about earlier, the best posture is your next posture. I'd probably say that 100 times a week because it's true. Movement is what our bodies are designed for. Instead of chasing the perfect posture, I'd much rather see you change positions throughout your knitting session. So lean back for a while, sit up a little differently, stand up, stretch, take a short walk, come back. Those little changes give your muscles a chance to do something different, and they make a huge difference over time. The second part of move well is positioning. Think about how you're setting yourself up to knit. Are your shoulders relaxed? Are your elbows supported? Is your project down in your lap, or have you brought it up closer to your eyes? Are you constantly looking down? Are you making it easier on your neck? Sometimes the smallest adjustments have the biggest impact, and sometimes it's as simple as putting a pillow under your elbows that can completely change how your neck and shoulders feel. That's one of my favorite things about ergonomics. People hear the word ergonomics and they immediately think, I have to buy an expensive chair, or I need all this special equipment. You really don't. Ergonomics simply means making the task fit your body instead of forcing your body to fit the task. So sometimes that means a pillow, sometimes it's better lighting, sometimes it's reading glasses, sometimes it's simply moving your knitting 6 inches higher. Those little changes reduce the amount of work your body has to do. And who doesn't want that? The second part of the framework is knit well. So this is one all about our habits. And I have to admit, I've been guilty of every single one of these. Knitting for too long, ignoring the warning signs, holding my breath, gripping my needles tighter when I'm concentrating, trying to finish just one more row. Does this all sound familiar? The truth is, most of us don't realize we're doing these things until our body points it out. So one of the biggest habits I encourage knitters to develop is awareness. Not judgment, awareness. So notice when your shoulders start creeping up. Notice when you're squeezing your needles. Notice when you've been sitting in the same position for an hour. Those little moments of awareness give you the opportunity to make a small adjustment before discomfort starts. And honestly, those small adjustments are usually all it takes. So finally, the last part of the framework is live well. And this is probably the piece people think about the least. So what happens outside of knitting affects what happens during knitting. So if you're not sleeping well, your body recovers differently. If you're dehydrated, your muscles don't function their best. And if you're under a lot of stress, you may notice yourself holding more tension in your neck and shoulders. If you've never done any strength training, your body may fatigue sooner than someone who has. Everything is connected. That's why you don't separate knitting from the rest of your life. Your body doesn't separate it. It's the same shoulders that carry groceries, the same hands that type on your computer, the same neck that looks at your phone, the same upper back that sits through meetings all day. Your knitting doesn't happen in isolation. It's part of everything else your body does. And that's why I love this framework, because it's realistic. It's not asking you to completely change your life. It's asking you to make small improvements in lots of different areas. Move a little better, knit a little smarter. Take care of yourself outside of knitting. Those little habits build on each other, and over time, they make a remarkable difference in how your body feels. So let's talk about one of the easiest places to start. So let's talk about your knitting setup. I think this is one area where people expect me, as my dog Phoebe, as a physical therapist, to say that you not need a lot of fancy equipment. Most of my favorite ergonomic tools are things that you already have at home. A pillow, a footstool, a good lamp, maybe a pair of reading glasses. The goal isn't to create the perfect knitting station. The goal is to make knitting a little easier on your body. So let's start with something else I see all the time. And if you're doing this, don't worry, I have done it too. So how many of you knit with your elbows just kind of floating out in space? I know I used to. You're holding your project, your arms are lifted, and your shoulders are doing all the work. So no, it doesn't seem like a big deal because your project isn't very heavy, but remember what we talked about earlier. Your shoulders aren't supporting your knitting, they're supporting your arms. And every minute that you're knitting, if your elbows are unsupported for an hour or two, those shoulder muscles never really get a chance to relax. One of the easiest changes you can make is to support your elbows, and that's it. Put a pillow under each arm. Put a rolled up blanket there, a couch cushion, whatever works. It doesn't have to be fancy. The pillow starts doing some of the work instead of asking your shoulder muscles to do it all. And I can't tell you how many patients and honestly how many knitters have told me, I can't believe that made such a difference. And sometimes that's all it takes. The next thing I want you to think about is where your project is. A lot of us knit down here, like way down in our lap, which means our head follows it. Our neck bends, our shoulders round. Before we know it, we're back in that knitting turtle position. Instead, see if you can bring your knitting a little closer to your eyes. Notice I didn't say bring your eyes down to your knitting. Bring your knitting up to you. So sometimes that's as simple as putting another pillow in your lap. Sometimes I'll even hug a pillow while I'm knitting, like put it here. You can't see my waist, but put it here and hug that pillow. Especially if I'm working on something that's a little bit heavier. If it feels a little funny at first, but your neck and shoulders will probably thank you. Lighting is another one that people don't think about. So if you can't see your stitches very well, your body's going to compensate. You'll probably lean forward, you squint, you bring your face closer and closer to your knitting instead of asking your neck to work harder. So ask your lighting to work harder. Personally, I love using a neck light. I use a Lumos neck light. I use it all the time if I'm knitting in the evening or in low light. Natural light is wonderful, but when I have it, but once it starts getting dark, I want good task lighting because when I can see my stitches clearly, I naturally do relax. And along those same lines, let's talk about reading glasses. So as I've gotten older, my close-up vision isn't quite what it used to be. I have reading glasses everywhere. I have a pair in my bag, my favorite knitting chair, my purse, so probably another pair floating around somewhere in the house. And I've learned not to fight it. So when I wear them, I don't lean forward nearly as much. I don't strain to see my stitches. I don't end my knitting session wondering why my neck feels so tight. Sometimes the solution isn't another stretch, and sometimes it's simply seeing your knitting better. So one more thing I want you to think about is your grip. This one always makes people laugh when I teach workshops because almost everyone is guilty of it. Have you ever noticed what happens when you're working on a complicated section, maybe a new technique, maybe a chart, maybe lace, cables, color work, without even realizing it, you start squeezing your needles tighter. Your hands tense up, your shoulders tense up, your jaw might even clench. I do that a lot. But I want you to imagine squeezing your needles as hard as you possibly can. Really, really, really squeeze and hold that for just a second. Now relax. Can you feel the difference? Most of us knit somewhere in the middle of those two extremes. We're using more effort than we actually need. So every once in a while, just check in with yourself. Ask, am I making this harder than it really needs to be? Loosen your grip. Relax your shoulders. Take a breath. Those tiny little adjustments don't seem like much in the moment, but when you repeat them over hundreds of knitting sessions, they can completely change how your body feels. And honestly, that's what ergonomics is all about. Not perfection, not expensive equipment, just making the task fit your body a little bit better. So now, even with the best setup in the world, there's still one habit that I think has the biggest impact on how comfortable you feel. And if you only remember one thing from this entire video, I hope it's what we're going to talk about next. It's the 20-minute rule. Honestly, if I could wave a magic wand and get every knitter to change just one habit, this would be it. Because I really believe it's one of the simplest things you can do to help your body. Now, I know what some of you are probably thinking. 20 minutes? That's nothing. I just got comfortable. I get it. Trust me. I get it. I knit too. I know what it's like to finally get into a rhythm. You're cruising along, your stitches are flowing. Maybe you've got your favorite podcast on, or you're watching a good movie. The last thing you want to do is stop. And then we all say the same thing. Just one more row, one more repeat. I'll stop after this sleeve. I'll stop after this colorwork section. And before you know it, you've been sitting there for 3 hours. I have absolutely done this. So even knowing everything I know as a physical therapist, I still lose track of time. And that's exactly why I don't rely on memory anymore, because memory isn't the problem. We're simply enjoying what we're doing. And I think that's actually a really wonderful thing. The goal isn't to become so disciplined that you're constantly watching the clock. The goal is to create a little system that helps you take care of yourself. So that's actually one of the reasons I created the Knit for Life app. So not because I needed someone to tell me how to stretch. I already knew that. I needed something to interrupt me before I'd been sitting there for 3 hours. Sometimes we all just need that little reminder, because when we're knitting, time disappears. It does for me. Now, why 20 minutes? Is there something magical about 20 minutes? Not really. Whether it's 20, 25, 30 minutes, the idea is simply to interrupt those long periods of repetitive movement and static posture before your body gets too fatigued. So remember everything we've talked about today. Repetitive movement, static posture, muscle fatigue. By taking a short movement break, we're addressing all three. And here's the best part. I'm not asking you to do a workout. I'm not asking you to spend 15 minutes stretching. Most movement breaks only need to last for a minute or two, and sometimes even less. So the easiest thing you can do, stand up. Seriously, that's it. Just stand. Your hips move, your knees move, your back changes position, your blood starts circulating a little bit differently, your muscles get a completely different job to do, and sometimes that's all you need. So maybe you walk into the kitchen, maybe you just fill your water, you let the dog outside, you throw in a load of laundry, you walk around the room, maybe you just do 1 or 2 stretches, you roll your shoulders, you stretch your forearms, you move your neck, you take a deep breath, then just sit back down. It doesn't have to be complicated. In fact, the simpler it is, the more likely that you'll do it. One of my favorite little tricks is keeping my water somewhere that I actually have to stand up to get it. So now, not within arm's reach, but across the room or across my desk where I have to stand up and get it. Because if I have to get up to take a drink, I'm automatically building movement into my knitting session while hydrating myself. Little things do like that really do add up. And I think sometimes people hear me talk about movement breaks and assume I'm saying you can never knit for 2 hours. That's totally not what I'm saying. Life happens. Sometimes you're finishing a deadline. Sometimes you're knitting on vacation. Sometimes you're sitting with friends at a retreat all afternoon. That's okay. The goal isn't perfection. The goal is consistency. So if you remember to move most of the time, you're already doing something really positive for your body. So one analogy I love is brushing your teeth. Most of us don't wait until we have a cavity to brush our teeth. We brush them because we're trying to prevent problems. So movement breaks work exactly the same way. We're not waiting until we're hurting. We're trying to prevent the discomfort from building in the first place. I think that's one of the biggest mindset shifts I hope you take away from this video. Don't wait until your neck hurts. Don't wait until your shoulders ache. Don't wait until your hands are throbbing. The best time to take a movement break is before you think you need one. So because prevention is almost always easier than recovery. Before we wrap up, I want to talk about one more piece of the puzzle that gets overlooked in the knitting world very often. When most knitters start having discomfort, the first thing they do is search for stretches. And don't get me wrong, I love stretching. I recommend stretching. I stretch. Stretching can absolutely help reduce muscle tension and improve mobility, but stretching is only part of the picture. So let me explain what I mean. So imagine you have a backpack that's just a little too heavy. You could stop every few minutes and stretch your shoulders. And that might help for a little while, but what if instead we gradually made your shoulders stronger? Now that exact backpack doesn't feel nearly as heavy. The backpack didn't change, you changed. Your capacity improved. That's exactly what strength training does. It helps your body tolerate the things you love doing, including knitting. So now I know the word strength training can sound intimidating, and some people immediately picture going to the gym, lifting heavy weights, doing complicated workouts, and that's not what I'm talking about. Strength can be incredibly simple. So maybe it's just a resistance band. Maybe it's a few body weight exercises. Maybe it's working on your upper back strength. Maybe it's improving your grip strength. Maybe it's just spending 5 or 10 minutes a couple times a week helping your body become a little bit stronger. So remember earlier when we talked about capacity, strength is one of the best ways to build it. The stronger your muscles become, the longer they can do their job before they start getting tired. That means your shoulders support your arms more easily. Your upper back helps maintain your posture with less effort. Your forearms tolerate longer knitting sessions, and everything starts working a little bit more efficiently together. So one thing I wish more knitters understood is that knitting itself doesn't necessarily strengthen everything we need for knitting. It strengthens some of the muscles, but not always in a balanced way. Think about it. So most of what we do while knitting happens in front of our body. Our hands are busy, our forearms are working. But the muscles that help support our posture, the muscles between our shoulder blades, our rotator cuff, our core, those often need a little extra attention. And the good news is it doesn't take very much. A few simple exercises done consistently can make a huge difference over time. So now here's something I really want you to hear. I'm not telling that you have to become a fitness enthusiast to enjoy knitting. That's not the goal. The goal isn't to become stronger for the sake of becoming stronger. The goal is to make knitting feel easier, to help your body support the hobbies that you love. I always tell people I'm not trying to build bodybuilders. I'm trying to build resilient knitters. People whose bodies can comfortably do the things that bring them joy. Because at the end of the day, that's really what it all comes back to. I don't want you to stop knitting because your neck hurts. I don't want you to give up that sweater you've been dreaming about making because your shoulders get tired. I want to help you build a body that says, yes, let's knit, instead of, I can't. And that's why I think strength deserves a seat at the table, right alongside stretching, movement breaks, and ergonomics. It's just another tool, not the only tool, but an important one. And when you put all those tools together, that's when things really start to change. One of the things I hope this video changes for you is the way you think about discomfort. Because I know what happens. You finish knitting, your neck feels tight, your shoulders sore, your hands are tired, and your first thought is, I shouldn't have been knitting. I don't want that to be your first thought anymore. Instead, I want your first thought to be, what is my body trying to tell me? Maybe it's saying, I've been in one position for too long. Maybe it's saying, I could use a movement break. Maybe it's saying, I need to support my arms a little better. Maybe it's saying, I've been working on this fingering weight sweater for 3 hours and it's probably time to call it a night or switch up projects. Those are very different conversations. One comes from fear and the other comes from understanding. And understanding gives you options. That's really what physical therapy is all about. It's not just treating pain, it's helping people understand why they're having pain in the first place. Because once you understand the why, the what do I do next becomes so much easier. I also want you to know that your body isn't keeping score. Your body isn't judging you because you got caught up in a project and forgot to take a break. Believe me, I've done it several times. You've probably done it. Well, probably both do it again at some point. The difference is now you know what to do afterward. You know how to respond. You know how to recover. That's progress, not perfection. And honestly, that's the mindset I hope you leave with today. I don't expect you to remember every single thing we've talked about. I don't expect you to change 10 habits tomorrow. In fact, I hope you don't. I hope you pick one thing, just one. Maybe today your one thing is supporting your elbows. Maybe it's setting a timer. Maybe it's using my app. Maybe it's standing up every 30 minutes. Maybe it's finally wearing those reading glasses you've been avoiding. One change, done consistently, is far more powerful than trying to change everything all at once. That's how habits are built. That's how bodies adapt, and that's how we keep knitting for years to come. So before we finish, I want to talk about something that's really important to me. Because after everything we've talked about today, some of you might still be wondering, so can I keep knitting? And my answer most of the time is absolutely. In fact, that's the entire reason I created Knit for Life. I want to teach people how to keep knitting. Now that does sometimes mean making a few adjustments. Absolutely. Maybe it means taking movement breaks. Maybe it means choosing a different project for a little while. Maybe it means strengthening your shoulders. Maybe it means supporting your elbows with a pillow. And maybe it means wearing your reading glasses. Those are all adjustments. They're not giving up. So one of the things I've learned over the years as a PT is that people are incredibly resilient. Our bodies are always adapting. They're always changing. They're always responding to the demands we place on them. I see it every day in the clinic. Someone comes in thinking, I'll never get back to doing what I love. And then, week by week, little by little, they get stronger. They move better. Their confidence comes back. Eventually, they're doing things they weren't sure they'd ever do again. And I think knitting deserves that same mindset. Instead of asking, what do I have to stop doing? I want you to start thinking, what can I do to help my body continue this? That's a completely different conversation. One is based on fear and the other is based on possibility. And that's really the heart of everything I teach. I don't want you to become afraid of your body. I want you to understand it. Because when you understand it, you stop feeling helpless. You start making small decisions that support your body instead of working against it. And over time, those little decisions become habits. Those habits become routines, and those routines make knitting feel better. That's really what Knit for Life is all about. Helping you build a body that supports the life you want to live. Not just your knitting, but everything. Because when your body feels better, you enjoy knitting more, you enjoy gardening more, you enjoy walking the dog, playing with your kids or your grandkids, traveling, living your life. Knitting is part of a much bigger picture, and it's part of a life that's full of creativity, community, and joy, and I want to help you protect all of it. You know, one of the things that makes me the happiest is when someone tells me, I thought I was going to have to give up knitting, because so often that's the fear people carry. They've had neck pain or shoulder pain, or their hands have started bothering them, and they assume this is it. I guess I can't knit anymore. As a physical therapist and as a knitter, this breaks my heart because knitting is so much more than making sweaters. It's stress relief, it's creativity, it's community, it's quiet time. It's accomplishing something with your own two hands. For some people, it's how they connect with family and friends. For others, it's how they cope with anxiety or grief or chronic illness. Knitting becomes part of who we are. That's why I don't take it lightly when someone thinks they have to give it up. Now, there are times when we need to modify what we're doing. Absolutely. Sometimes your body needs a little time to calm down. Sometimes you need treatment. Sometimes you temporarily change projects. Maybe you put the fingering weight sweater aside for a week and work on something with larger needles. Maybe you break your knitting into shorter sessions. Those are smart decisions. They're not failures, and they're almost never permanent. One thing I've learned after treating thousands of patients is this: the human body wants to heal. It wants to adapt, it wants to move. Sometimes it just needs guidance. That's really what I hope Knit for Life becomes, a place where knitters feel supported, a place where they can learn, a place where they realize they're not alone. Because if you're watching this thinking, I'm the only one whose neck hurts, or I'm the only one who has to take breaks, you're definitely not. I promise you, you're in very good company, including me. And I hope that gives you a little reassurance, because my goal has never been to create perfect knitters. My goal is to help real knitters, people with busy lives, people who get excited about projects, people who occasionally stay up way too late trying to finish one more sleeve, people who love this craft enough to want to keep doing it for the rest of their lives. That's who I'm here for. And if that's you, welcome. You're in the right place. So throughout this video, we've been talking about normal aches, muscle fatigue, and stiffness that can happen after long knitting sessions. And those things are actually pretty common. But there are times when I don't want you to simply stretch it out and keep knitting. There are certain symptoms that do deserve a little more attention. So for example, if you're experiencing persistent numbness, tingling, weakness, pain that's waking you up at night, or symptoms that continue for several days after you've stopped knitting, those are things I would encourage you to have evaluated by a healthcare professional. As a PT, I always tell people, your body is really good at communicating with you. The key is learning which messages are saying, I've been working hard, and which messages are saying, I need a little more help. And if something doesn't seem right, trust yourself. Get it checked out. The earlier we address a problem, the easier it usually is to manage. So now, with that being said, I hope the biggest thing you take away from today's video isn't fear. I hope it's hope. Because after treating people for more than 25 years, I can honestly tell you this. Our bodies are strong. They absolutely can learn to tolerate knitting better. I've seen people return to knitting after tendonitis, after shoulder injuries, neck pain, surgery. I've seen people who thought they were finished knitting go back to making beautiful things again. So that's why I'm so passionate about teaching this. I don't want anyone giving up the hobby they love simply because they don't understand what's happening in their body. Most of the time, there are things we can do. Sometimes they're really small changes. They do take patience, but they matter, and those little changes add up. So before we finish today, I want to leave you with 3 things I'd love for you to remember. Number 1, movement is medicine. Your body was designed to move. Don't be afraid to move. In fact, your body usually feels better when we do. Number 2, prevention is almost always easier than recovery. Don't wait until your neck hurts. Don't wait until your shoulders ache. Take those movement breaks, support your arms, check in with yourself. Your future self will thank you. And number 3, you deserve to enjoy knitting comfortably, and I really believe that. You shouldn't have to choose between taking care of your body and making things you love. That's exactly what Knit for Life is about, to help knitters understand their bodies, make small changes, build healthy habits, and continue enjoying this amazing craft for years to come. So if you found this video helpful, I'd really appreciate it if you give it a thumbs up, maybe hype it. It helps YouTube share this information with more knitters who might need it. And if you're interested in learning more about knitting ergonomics, stretches, strengthening, exercises, or ways to prevent discomfort before it starts, I'd love to have you subscribe. Every week I jump on here and talk about practical ways that can help you knit more comfortably. Sometimes I just share what I'm working on. So before we go, I want to end every episode with something that's become really important to me. I call it the Kindness Corner. One of the things I really love most about the knitting community is how generous people are. We cheer each other on, we answer questions, we celebrate FOs, we help fix mistakes, and I think the world could always use a little more of that. So this week I want to leave you with a simple challenge. Think about one person in your knitting community who could use a little encouragement. Maybe it's someone who's struggling with a project. Maybe it's a new knitter who's just learning. Maybe it's someone who shared an FO online. Send them a message. Leave a kind comment. Tell them you love their work. Offer to help. Small acts of kindness have a way of spreading much farther than we ever realize. Just like a small healthy habit, they do add up over time. So thank you so much for spending part of your day with me. I truly appreciate you being here. And until next time, take care of yourself. Take care of each other. Keep moving, keep knitting, and as always, I hope you find comfort in every stitch. Remember, your body's adaptable, your knitting journey isn't over. Sometimes it just needs a better plan. I'll see you next week. Bye.